I will say this. You know, we used to have back when years ago when I first started doing radio in town, there was a guy, really good dude. Cody's his name. Really good guy. And Cody used to like to partake in afternoon relaxation, usually 1/3 of the way through the hour after 4 o'clock. And for that reason, Cody gave himself the self-proclaimed nickname of Toast. He would call the radio show when I was doing afternoons, usually at about 20 after 4, and he'd be like, yeah, man, it's Toast. And I'd have to remind him the show was over at 6 because it'd take him a while to get to his point. Good dude, though. He would be perfectly and appropriately named for today in terms of being out here at Grand Park in Westfield because it's a little toasty. I'm not going to lie to you. I will actually, and I won't mention it too many times. I mean, I don't know, somewhere between 3 and 200. The number of times, the commitment that I am showing for you Colts fans, for you listeners of this show, that I'm willing to, and I know it. Listen, don't buy into the hype. Don't buy the hype. Everything you see that says don't go outside, heat advisory, dangerous, drink plenty of water, all that, don't pay attention to any of that because your favorite radio host says, no, I'm willing to sit in an open field an hour after practice ended and do a radio show to bring content to you folks. That's the commitment, the dedication I have. There is a slight breeze going through, so that's nice. It is day number 2 for Colts practice and Colts camp here at Grand Park in Westfield. And James Boyd is, I don't know if James just enjoys the toast feeling. It's a little, yesterday it was around 2, so it wasn't terrible because it was only the last hour of the show. But I will say, around 2 o'clock is when the humidity really picked up, and it was like, whoa, it is warm out here. Matter of fact, there was a guy yesterday mowing the field that I looked, and he just stopped at the 35-yard line, put that bad boy in park, and left. And then it was me and the rooster that thinks that it's 4 in the morning that was calling behind me. But it was cool because there was a lot to talk about yesterday, and there's going to be a lot to talk about today. There's going to be a lot to talk about today because, and I'm going to give a pop quiz for all of you folks, the listeners of this program. Because I know and I trust and I believe in the aptitude, the intellect of all of you, the instinct of all of you. You're a smart audience. This company, Querying Company, we have a rigorous process by which we do hiring. And that includes making sure that you have the finest of education, and if you didn't, you consulted George O'Leary and lied about it anyway, and so we hired you. I mean, we're very, very on top of it here. And so I know the wisdom that all of you have. And I will give you a glimpse behind the curtain. And that glimpse behind the curtain is this. On each day for the Colts camp, because the practice ends at 11 o'clock, tomorrow it will be closer to 11:15. But by practice ending at 11 o'clock, that affords us the opportunity to conduct interviews as soon as the practice is over and then run them in the show within the hour or so. And I did an interview earlier that I believe, because sometimes you can tell, I've done this for a while, and sometimes you can tell when someone says something, you're like, that feels like a news nugget. That feels like that may grow some legs and move at the pace that is suddenly going to become like a small story that then people are going to start talking about it. And the interview that I did with Bernard Ryman, who I think is going to be a very, very important player, already is a very important player for the Colts, but a very important player, and he said something about halfway through the interview where I thought to myself, you know what? My mom and 7 other people will be listening to this probably when this happens, but if my mom gets out her laptop, she will hear that quote from Bernard Ryman, and that may become a news story here in day number 2 of Colts camp. James Boyd watched practice earlier today. We will get reaction from him, but before we do so, Eddie, if you could please with the breaking news sounder. This just in the last couple of minutes, there are multiple reports now that the man who first broke through in 1983 was the first that I knew of him as Thunderlips in Rocky III and became one of the most beloved figures within professional wrestling, and later went on to obviously a reality television series, some polarization, but at the same time, I think it is safe to say, by most accounts, a beloved figure for the course of his career. Hulk Hogan passing away earlier today. That announcement just coming within the last 30 minutes or so. That Hulk Hogan. So Ozzy Osbourne, Hulk Hogan within the last couple of days. And certainly I know there were plenty of fans. I don't know if you look at the rise of professional wrestling, the WWE. Admittedly, that is not as much my wheelhouse as many. Mark Dighton comes to mind in that regard. But certainly if you were a kid of the 80s and the 90s, it was impossible to not know of the impact of professional wrestling in the entertainment scale and the arena and stadium scale. And I don't know that anybody was a bigger figure in all of that than Hulk Hogan. He was the absolute face of, and I think to a great extent, the center of the rise of that sport over time. It has not been, I don't know, and I'm just seeing this right now. Eddie, you can chime in if you saw it differently than I. I simply saw the headline of it, did not get a chance to go into it. I don't know if a cause or if he had been ill of why Hulk Hogan passed away at the age of 71. So I'm not sure if that was a sudden thing or a private illness either way. Eddie, were you a fan of professional wrestling in that era?
Not really, Jake. And TMZ reporting that it was a cardiac arrest. That's what the quote was that they have about arriving to his home early Thursday morning. But no, I was never really into pro wrestling at all.
Okay, so there you go, cardiac arrest. So obviously hard for Hulk Hogan. But and I realize obviously Hulk Hogan was his stage name. And, you know, if you're going to go in you know, Terry Bollea, I believe Bollea was his actual birth name, but Hulk Hogan passing away. In terms of practice from earlier today for the Colts camp, in this day number 2, practice number 2, I made a pact to myself. I'm a sweeter, more sensitive guy. I just am. You know, like this weekend for the IndyCar race, the title sponsor is Java House, and they are partnered with the Indianapolis-based Splenda. Splenda's a sweetener. And you know, Splenda's made here, so I'm a more sweet guy. So I'm the sweeter Splenda version of the midday show here on this radio station, your midday option. So I'm not going to, in any way, shape, or form, after one day of a 1-hour practice, make any sort of a flippant comment about the fact that DeForest Buckner, Tyquan Lewis, Kenny Moore II, and Braden Smith all got a veteran rest day today. I'm not in any way, shape, or form going to make any comment about the fact that after, you know, an hour of practice on day number 1, that it's important to go ahead and make sure those guys are rested. And, you know, you got to get your rest. You got to get your rest. And it was pretty hot yesterday. If they needed, like, IV fluids or something, I get it. And I'm being totally serious when I say that. But I think it was an already written-in veteran rest day for those 4. Again, DeForest Buckner, Tyquan Lewis, Kenny Moore, and Braden Smith, all with a rest day today. No practice after one day. Load management, folks. Load management. But in terms of the on-field activity today, probably the biggest story is the fact that Anthony Richardson threw an interception. And I don't know how much you read into that. He threw an interception to Juju Brents. If you were a glass half full guy, you would say, great play by Juju Brents. But it also was not a great throw from Anthony Richardson. And I think that we're still going to see that. This reminds me, the Anthony Richardson watch reminds me for a little bit of the, if you remember Peyton Manning, when he was coming off of the neck injury, we were waiting for the nerves to regenerate themselves. And so he would have throws, and I'm talking about more so when he was with Denver in that first year. But he had some throws that would be, he would let go of it, and you're like, where in the world is that going? And then other throws where you could tell he was putting everything into it, and it just didn't have enough oomph. And there were a lot of just kind of floating ducks that Peyton Manning was throwing around at that time. And I don't know if it's the shoulder. I don't know if it is, you know, footwork. There are a number of different ways that you can look at it. But with any of them, it very clearly, with Anthony Richardson, he is still trying to find his exact footing. And as a quarterback. I don't mean literally his footing. I mean still the mechanics and just finding the precision as a quarterback is something that Anthony Richardson is searching for, without question. And by the way, yes, when I say that whenever there is a celebrity passing and they say they come in threes, Malcolm Jamal Warner, Ozzy Osbourne. I forgot about Malcolm Jamal Warner. Malcolm Jamal Warner, Ozzy Osbourne, and Hulk Hogan is the three. So sad on all three of them because all three had and left a major impact in three different ways. Absolutely no question about it. By the way, yesterday I had 3 liters of water. I'm going for 4 today, baby. And I'm curious of this. When did water become electrolyte infused? Isn't water just by principle like 2 hydrogen, 1 oxygen? Who puts in the electrolytes, and does that change the H2O balance of it? Matt Taylor, the voice of the Colts, going to join us at 1:30 today, and I think actually, I mean, that guy was educated at Ron Colley. Like, he knows these kinds of things. Chemistry expert. Yesterday we were in here. It was amazing to me. We were the last 2 people in here before the rooster woke up, and Matt was actually over playing with an abacus for the better part of yesterday. So we're talking intellect that I'm surrounded by. So I'm going to ask Matt Taylor that question later. But the electrolytes are important today because it's a little toasty. It's a little warm. I'm not going to lie to you. But that was the big story. Richardson threw an interception today. We again continue to see, and Lou Anaromo makes no bones about this, as a matter of fact, just when talking about Justin Wally, the young corner. I think he's going to be a real talking point over the course of this camp. 2 days do not a camp make. A camp does not a preseason make, and a preseason does not a season make. But from the time that he was drafted, I think the overall instinct and athleticism of Wally is something that they have continued to talk and profess about and almost brag about, to be honest with you. And it's one thing to talk about that, but it's another thing to talk about it and then put it into motion. And when you consider Jalen Jones and Juju Brents, who I mentioned earlier had an interception today, those are 2 guys that have been on the field. In the case of Juju Brents, who I do like, I like his athleticism, I like his length, I like his close gap ability, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. But there's a lot I like about Juju Brents, but health has been the one question mark. And because he has not been able to stay on the field from a health standpoint, he's got to kind of work his way back in. So to have a guy that was playing, in the Big Ten 6 months ago, 9 months ago, whatever it may be, and now you are putting him in and you are immediately saying, this guy's going with unit number 1. That says something. And it's one thing to talk about the intrigue you have with a young player. It's another one to go ahead and put him on the pedestal and on display for everybody being out there. And that's what they've done with him so far. Now, in terms of windows, you've heard me mention it before, but I always go back to one of the first camps that I covered here extensively would have been Peyton Manning's first camp. And I remember vividly. I remember actually where we were when the quote happened. Tom Moore, Bruce Arians at that time was a quarterback's coach for the Colts, and Tom Moore was an offensive coach for the Colts. And they were, both of them, they were regular subjects for interview after those practices because everyone wanted to know, not unlike now, when everyone wants to know I think there's a thought process that there is a defer to Daniel Jones. And by that I mean there is the thought process in the case of Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson, that Daniel Jones is the starting quarterback that you defer to if Richardson can't find stability or whatever else. But I think there are a lot of people that think, okay, they're going to give Richardson, they want it to be Richardson. And then if it doesn't work, Jones is your default. So I guess by default is what I'm saying. Even though Jones is starting out and started yesterday taking starting reps. But I think Richardson is going to get like all these opportunities, right, because of what is invested both financially and also equity in him. And so for that reason, that is a huge topic of conversation, question, everything else from every coach that analyzes that position that we will talk about regularly over the course of this camp. And that was the case when Manning was a rookie, and even into his second and third year, the progress of Peyton Manning was a constant source of discussion and analysis in his early time. Same with Andrew Luck, but Luck hit the ground running. I mean, with Andrew Luck, it was like, boom, let's go. Manning took a little bit more conditioning, truth be told. And one of the things that I remember the most was Tom Moore saying after a practice that Manning came over and Tom Moore said, this is when I knew that Manning still had stuff to work on. Tom Moore was getting on him for not throwing a pass. I think it might have been to Jerome Pathon. And he said, well, you got to throw it. You got to uncork that ball. And Manning said, no. The window wasn't open. And Tom Moore said, that's what you don't understand. In the NFL, that's the window. You're not playing South Carolina anymore. You're not playing Florida anymore. You're not playing Vanderbilt anymore. The window here is that tight. When it is that tight, if there's any opening, you got to thread it right then. And your timing has to be that you anticipate window before it opens. And that's where Manning became so good, is when any receiver, an Austin Collie, a Brian Fletcher, receivers that were good, maybe not great receivers, were made to look great because they knew they would run a route and break. The second they turned around, the ball was right there where it needed to be, when it needed to be there. Because Manning figured out how to make that throw, not when the window was open, but rather when the window was going to be open and anticipating the eighth of a second that it was going to be open. And Anthony Richardson, to me, still looks like a guy that is the thing he has not yet figured out. The window for Anthony Richardson, when you grow up and you are able to out-physical in every aspect of what you need to do by your arm strength, your run strength, your break tackle strength, when those things naturally are happening for you, then to all of a sudden go into a situation for the first time. And when I say the first time, I realize the guy's been in the league for a while now, but he's been hurt. So when Richardson is out there on the field right now, he is going up against players that he does not out-physical much anymore. Yes, he does. For the quarterback position, it's more unique than any other quarterback. But with all of that said, the areas in which he is able to use his size and strength are fewer and further between at the professional level than the college level. And that window from a throw or even a decision-making standpoint is faster. And they still elude him. And today, with Juju Brents getting the pick that he made, it wasn't even that Juju Brents necessarily immediately collapsed in on a window. It was that there was a pass that was simply a floater. I mean, it was not a well-thrown football. And Juju Brents was able to, I talked about instinctively make that play. Instinctively make the play. Big show lined up for us. Eddie, please give for me, if you could, the rundown of what we have lined up on the big program today here on a Thursday edition of Aquarian Company.
So in less than 15 minutes, we'll have Colts left tackle Bernard Ryman joining the program. At the top of the hour, Stephanie White, I think, is making an appearance, Jake. I'm not sure because I don't know if you've told her or not. Since her last visit last week, prior to the All-Star break, I did not watch Shawshank Redemption, so I don't know if she's going to make the call-in because she did say that in order to provide her analysis that I had to go watch it, and I have not gone and watched it yet, so we'll see if she picks up the phone at 1 o'clock. Matt Taylor will join us. I think he's joining you right there at Grand Park at 1:30, so you have a little friend in the sweltering heat.
Now you tell me if this should offend me. You tell me, Eddie. I'll cut you off there. You tell me if this should offend me, okay? So let me set the scene here. If you come out for practice at the Colts camp, it's great. I mean, it's very cool. And it actually is really cool to have the access that we do because I'm sitting right on the sidelines right off of the end zone. I can't complain about any of it. It's amazing. And the Colts have actually been very, very helpful in helping us out with these interviews beforehand and everything else. So not a complaint at all. Obviously, we booked these and came up with what shows we were doing live before we had the official practice schedule. And the practice ends at 11 o'clock, tomorrow, 11:15. So and it's also, I don't know if you know this. Did you ever see that movie with Matt Damon where he lived on Mars?
No.
Okay. Well, I'm living
Is that Martian?
So, yes, The Martian. Thank you. Now, I'm not. There's in no way, shape, or form am I going to make a potato field out of my own dung here. But it is warm, okay, and I'm the only one here. So, I don't know if I should be offended by this or not. But yesterday, Casey Vallier and Matt Taylor, both working for the Colts, they are inside of the same tinted area. So we do have cover from the sun, which is good. That we are on, looking out onto the field. They both just picked up a table and walked out of here. I don't know what I'm supposed to make of that. But there was they were sitting before me. Casey Vallier was sitting next to me yesterday for the better part of the day. And, it was just nice to have that, the human camaraderie. Both of them, they literally, in tandem, they looked at each other. They both grabbed the underside of the table, picked it up, and walked out of here. So now, literally, I'm the Martian, which I know is surprising to you, right, Eddie?
Not at all. Not at all, Jake.
Okay, so then after Matt Taylor, 2 o'clock hour, what's lined up on the big program?
Tom Dienhart, Gold and Black. We talked to Zach Osterman yesterday about what Kurt Signetti had to say at Big Ten Media Day. Barry Odom meets with the media out in Las Vegas this afternoon, so Tom Dienhart will talk about that, and plus all the different additions and how different Purdue will look this year, football-wise.
Yeah, I'm very curious about Purdue. I'm very curious about Purdue because listen, we went last year. Remember I went to the Purdue-Oregon game. I was going to go watch Purdue shock the world with Purdue and Oregon, and it did not go. I did get to meet the Duck, which was awesome. I met the Oregon Duck. The picture is actually 6 foot by 6 foot framed inside of my place now. But that was the highlight of it. But I really like going to Ross Stadium and going to games. It just feels like a big environment. It does. Night games at Purdue does. But they've been terrible. And I'm hoping that takes care of itself today. James Boyd just walked over real quick. I'm going to grab him before he takes up out of here, and we're going to get his thoughts and his observations on what he saw from camp. Of course, you heard James this morning along with Kevin Bowen, as they will be again tomorrow from 7 until 10 a.m. James, first off, now help me out here. It is warmer now than when you guys were on this morning, correct?
Yes, it is warmer, but to me, the breeze helps.
It does.
The breeze certainly helps.
It does.
Opening this up was a genius decision.
Yeah, there's the tent behind us has there's a great view of Touchdown Town or whatever it's called behind us, which, again, I'm the Martian, right? I mean, that's back there is where I'm actually, if I do decide to do so, where I'm going to plant my dung potato field, like Matt Damon did in the movie The Martian. Okay, so give me the rundown. I mentioned the fact Anthony Richardson threw kind of a lame duck today, and they continue to be impressed with Justin Wally, it would appear, but what else jumped out at you?
I thought those were certainly the biggest takeaways. Obviously, anytime you throw it to the other team in practice, that's going to get noted. And I think Anthony still, at times, a bit inaccurate. I thought Daniel Jones had a fairly okay day. It wasn't something that jumped out to me. No one really had, like, the big-time play. Like yesterday's day when Daniel Jones hit Anthony Gould down the sideline. There was no, like, big play from either of the top two quarterbacks. A little bit of a Tyler Warren sighting, I thought. You know, he made a couple catches today, and I thought that he was a little bit more involved, which –
does he look more, Tyler Warren, like an in-stride across the middle catching guy, or can contort his body and make the difficult catch kind of guy?
Good question. I think he's a great, contested catch guy. I don't know if he's like the contorting his body type. Right. However, it was good to just see him get open across the middle and kind of get some balls, because that is an area of the field that the Colts have really lacked in when it comes to any type of success in recent years. They've never had anybody over the middle to catch the ball. And so just seeing him get a little more involved than he was yesterday was a good sign. Cam Bynum was very spoke very highly of him when was saying, hey, the guy, if you didn't tell me, I wouldn't know that he's a rookie. So that's a good sign from how he's approached the game, how he's kind of integrated into the offense. So that stood out to me as well. And then Jelani Woods sighting, keeping with the tight end theme. I thought, for a second, I was like, wait a second, he's back healthy. And I get, Jelani Woods hype in July is always a little, scary, because he's had injury history. However, just seeing him get out there, you wonder, does that matter?
All right, we will continue to monitor all of those things. James, you should get your laptop ready, because I don't know this.
Okay.
But I think, I've done this a long time. Every once in a while when you do an interview, and I'm sure this happens with you, you do an interview and somebody says something where you're like, I think that's a news nugget. I think I just got dropped the news nugget. And just before this show began, I did record an interview with Bernard Ryman, who is entering his 4th year. And most importantly, by the way, this bottled water that I bought, it's a brand I'm not familiar with. Looks like a tequila bottle.
I was going to say, are you drinking on air here? Is that
it looks like I'm drinking tequila.
It is National Tequila Day, so it would be fitting.
Is it National Tequila Day?
It is indeed.
Oh, let's go. Here we go. Hold on.
Oh,
you got a lime for me?
Oh, my goodness.
For the salt, all I got to do is do that, right? I don't even need natural salt. This is bottled water, everybody, just so you know, but it does look like it's in a tequila bottle on National Tequila Day. All right, Bernard Ryman interview next. He is in a contract year, and typically with that, a guy simply says, yeah, I let other people worry about that. But Bernard Ryman went one step further. The interview's next. Day number 2 is now in the books. Colts Camp Grand Park up in Westfield, where we are. Jake Query here up in Hamilton County, and joined by a guy that I think is a real key figure for this Colts team entering year number 4 now, Bernard Ryman, the left tackle of out of Central Michigan, where, you know, you were – I always forget about this. You started out as a tight end.
Yes, sir.
Then you transitioned in college. And I remember talking to you when you were a rookie just about still kind of learning that position. Did you feel like from an NFL standpoint there again was kind of that same learning curve, because that left tackle position is so important at the NFL level, and there was so much expected on you from an early standpoint from the time you stepped on the field?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, college, it was quick turnaround. It was, you know, COVID year. We had 6 games. Then my senior season, we had 12 games. So 18 games at tackle, and then, you know, had to make an NFL team. So that was definitely a big learning curve. But we have some great veterans in the room that really helped me out. You know, Q, Braden, Ryan, all those guys were huge my rookie year. And they've also, you know, it stayed that way too. Like every single year I can keep learning from them. I can keep improving my game. And that's what it's all about. Just, you know, keep on improving, work on the little things, and trying to get better every day.
You know, the guy that was the staple and the pillar at that position, obviously just before you, was Anthony Costanzo. And Costanzo to me was always fascinating, because in getting to know him over the course of his career, the one thing I learned is that he never stopped learning. Like, he took the left tackle position almost like a geometric science of studying all aspects and angles of it. Do you agree with that kind of mental approach of the position?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just even the smallest things, the smallest angle, the smallest step, the smallest, you know, muscle you use when you push off, like, that can all affect your game in so many ways and can improve your game. So I think if you don't focus on these little things, and if you don't study the game, if you don't study your opponents, if you don't study these things, I think you stop learning, and then you either get better or you get worse. There's no standing still, I think, in this league. So yeah, if you don't improve, you won't make it here long.
You know, football in general, for fans, and I don't mean to say whether it's Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones or Riley Leonard or whoever, fans would like to see the consistency of just who's the starting quarterback and let's go with that. From a line standpoint, as the guy that's protecting, and you are the blindside protector, does the approach change or the style change based on who it is that you are protecting?
To be honest, not really. I mean, all those guys are obviously great players off the field, but also on the field. I mean, they all have the arm to throw the ball, you know, deep. They all can make the reads, but they're also all athletic. So,
do they have different tendencies though, in terms of like one guy? And that's what I meant by that more so. Like, you know, one guy, you know, okay, he's going to spend more time this side pocket or that side, or oscillate this way, that way. Can you get too caught up in what it is that their tendencies favor?
A little bit, but I mean, at the end of the day, the defense, you know, decides a lot of that too. I mean, if a quarterback usually gets rid of the ball faster, but the defense is taking away the first 2 reads or whatever, then obviously he's going to hold on to the ball longer. So as an O-lineman, you can't rely on you can't guess, but which is obviously also the difficult part about this position. You don't exactly know where the quarterback is at all times. You don't know if he's holding onto the ball, if he is rolling out of the pocket. So it's good to learn the quarterbacks, like the cadences, their style, the plays they prefer. But at the end of the day, I think in game it's kind of you trying to do your job, and you protecting whoever's back there.
That is the voice of Bernard Ryman. We are at Colts Camp up at Grand Park in Westfield. Bernard entering year number 4, left tackle for the Colts. If it were up to you, would you rather have stability and in terms of every single game, same starter at the quarterback position or the center position?
I mean, both would be great, but obviously in this league, it's a day-to-day business where people get hurt all the time. I mean, you see year after year, but I trust all of these guys. I trust the entire quarterback room. I trust all of our centers to step up and do what needs to be done to win games. So I'm not too concerned about it. I trust all of those guys.
I thought Bartolini last year, when put in the center position, and I like Danny Pinter and his kind of Swiss Army knife aspect as well, but Bartolini, I thought when he was put in the center position, did play really well and showed a lot of promise of being – he kind of reminds me of you, to be honest with you, of a guy that he went into that position and you wondered what it was going to be, but it looked like he was acclimated from the get-go. Now, for you, when you observe him or help him out as a young player, can you see where there is growth or areas that need to be improved?
I mean, absolutely. I see growth from him every single day. I know, Tanner and Danny are battling it out. Wesley French is in the mix too. They're all great players, and I think it's really going to come down to little things in their game that obviously the higher ups, the coach is going to decide. But for me personally, I see improvements from all of them, and I see how much they work on it. I see how much they want it, and that is just it fuels the whole group, because if there's some guys doing extra reps, then it encourages everyone else to do the same thing. So we just keep on pushing each other. Even if it's between a tackle and a center, it doesn't matter. We try to improve as a group, and I think they're all going to be really, really good for the season.
Do you remember your first start?
Yeah.
Do you remember the positive things that came from it, or the plays where you got beat?
I mean, obviously, I think as an athlete, as a football player, but as an O-lineman specifically, you always remember the bad plays more so than
because that has to kind of drive you a little bit, right?
It absolutely does. I mean, it stings, it hurts, because the good plays are expected and the bad plays are unacceptable. So I think that's just part of the position. The first it happens. It keeps you up at night. But you end up learning from it. You're getting better from it.
Is your position mental?
Oh, absolutely.
Does that make sense? Like, can you get into kind of a streak or a slump mentally where then you got to fight your way back from it?
Oh, absolutely. I think you've seen in the league every year that people get in their own heads, and players that are usually consistent all of a sudden drop off just because their mentality isn't right, or they start thinking about too much. And I absolutely believe that it's a huge thing about this position specifically, just because there's a lot of pressure. But I mean, for us, we just rely on each other, and we do a good job supporting each other.
You're in a contract year, Bernard Ryman. Here you are in year number 4. You have earned the right for a big-time deal. I see the numbers, 2021 projected per year, etc. Is this the first priority of where you want to be?
No, I mean, first priority for me is winning a Super Bowl this year.
But I mean, in terms of the franchise you want to be with, is Indianapolis your first priority?
Yes. I mean, obviously, we love it here. Would love to, get things done. But I'm not involved in this. Obviously, you have an agent that takes care of this. From my understanding, they aren't on the same page about things. So
you say they're not on the same page.
As of right now, they're not exactly on the same page right now. So, but I mean, as I said, for me as a football player, I'm preparing for the season because that's what matters.
Yeah, I understand. When you talk to your agent about it, when he says, "Hey, look, they're not on the same page," do you think that means just in terms of the Colts don't want to have the discussion yet, or the numbers themselves are way off base?
From my understanding, is that the numbers don't always quite add up yet. The way they might value the position differently than my team thinks it is. But we're working on things.
Your position's one of the most valuable here. You know that, right? Like, I'll be your agent for you here. Your position is really important.
Right.
So
obviously, I'm well aware of that.
You just want to make sure they're well aware of that, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, I know that. My agent knows that. Hoping the Colts know that too. But obviously, for me, it's about the here and now. I'm improving. I'm working on this. We still have a guaranteed season with the Colts right now. That's what I'm working on. We're working towards that Super Bowl, and everything else is up to people outside of right here.
Okay, I want to ask you this. Every year, when our jobs are similar in this aspect, and that is that once the NFL season begins, if I want to take time off for a vacation, it's got to come really during the bye week because, everything kind of centers around what you guys are doing, understandably so. So this year on the bye week, I thought, well, I like to go over to Europe. That's one of my things that I enjoy doing. I really want to see Vienna, your home city of Vienna, Austria. But the bye week, I think, is the first weekend in November. Now, what would the weather be like if I go over then? Is that a terrible time to go?
I don't think it's ever a terrible time to visit Vienna. But it's going to be similar to here, similar to like the Midwest temperature. So it might be cold and rainy there. But it's still a beautiful time. I mean, you can still do a lot of sightseeing there. I'm not quite sure if the Christmas markets will be open by then, but that's definitely something you got to.
I bet that's pretty cool,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
What do you miss most about home?
Family and friends, so the people, really.
Do you get a chance? How often do you go back, or like in the off season, do you get to go back?
Usually we go in the off season, but this year my wife and I, we just had a baby, so obviously we didn't travel with the little one, but we'll be back.
Congrats! How old is the baby?
5 months now. Thank you.
So are you getting any sleep?
Yeah. I mean, we moved into the hotel right now, so that's obviously helping. No, but she's been great. She's been a good sleeper.
Okay, so with that, in terms of right now, just your overall mindset, when you look at this roster, you look at where you guys were from a year ago and maybe areas you fell short, what is both the Bernard Ryman and the Indianapolis Colt, I guess, mindset? And I know you're going to say, well, it's to go to the Super Bowl. I get that. I'm not looking for the patented answer here, right? The reality answer is when you guys resume and you sit down and you look over things, the area that you say to yourself, we've got to get this right is what?
I think it's just daily improvements. It's the little things. Sometimes it's a lot of the times it's like a play or two short. It's a score, a field goal that can make a difference at the end of the game. It's always close. But we can't afford that as a team. Close isn't good enough. So
Shane Steichen had mentioned that games oftentimes come down to like the last couple of drives and the frantic nature of it. Now, he told us, I don't know if he's told you this, that in practice what he wants to try to do in this camp is create havoc and create chaos for you guys to then get used to navigating through. Have you seen that approach from a practice standpoint?
Absolutely. I mean, there's been a lot of urgency, a lot of different situations thrown at us in meetings, in practice, and I think the coaches are really trying to push all of us, not just physically, but also, like you mentioned, mentally with the different situations, like end of the game and stuff. So I've definitely noticed that.
Okay, lastly, because we did this last time I talked to you, so Arnold Schwarzenegger obviously is from Austria. You probably get tired of doing this every single time you talk to people, but we had you do Bernard Ryman, I'll be back, like in the Schwarzenegger voice. But now what I need you to say is, I'm Bernard Ryman, and I want to be back. All right? Now, your agent probably isn't going to want to hear that, but here we go from a leverage standpoint. All right, here we go. 3, 2, and 1.
I'm Bernard Ryman, and I want to be back.
Yes. All right, Bernard Ryman, year 4. Appreciate it. Best of luck to you. Bernard Ryman here. Colts camp, practice number 2. We will recap for you everything that took place here at the camp itself and get you set up for this on what is going to be a very, very warm Thursday. No question about it. It's Query Company here. You're listening to it, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan. So you folks tell me if I'm wrong, but it seemed to me, and yes, I cannot imagine a scenario where the Colts don't do everything possible to retain Bernard Ryman. But when he said, my understanding from my agent is that we are not close, I thought initially what he meant by that was because I was thinking about Ryan Kelly. And a year ago when Chris Ballard had said, like, you know, we let Ryan Kelly know that we'll wait until the end of the year before we assess things. And obviously in that situation, and understandably, you know, the Colts decided to move on and go with a younger center. I get that. But in the case of Bernard Ryman, I think the best interest here for the Colts is to lock him in now. Because I think realistically, and yes, certainly Bernard Ryman is a guy that could get hurt. Knock on wood, you don't wish that for anybody, opposition or, you know, whatever it may be. But having said that, I think the longer that he goes and the more he plays into this year and the more that he continues to progress as he has, and he has progressed, he is a good player. And that is, I'm telling you, the left tackle position is one that the value alone of just having that be a box check that you don't have to worry about, the value in that alone is a starting point that gives you financial flexibility or financial, if you're the player, that you go with that and say, look at the number of teams around the NFL that are looking still for a left tackle. It is this town and this franchise, I think, have been spoiled by the fact that you go essentially from Tarek Glenn right to Anthony Costanzo and then essentially, you know, a bumpy transition and then into Bernard Ryman. And Ryman looks like he is going to be a long-term pillar guy. And if he is, the value alone in knowing that that is a position that you don't have to further analyze or address. Ask other teams around the league. And the more that he plays this year and the more that he plays at the level he's playing, you are increasing the odds that elsewhere some franchise is going to run into a situation, be it due to injury, due to retirement, any number of things, where they then are in a situation where now they are back to the drawing board on left tackle, and that is the one of quarterback would be the hardest. But I think if you asked a lot of people, they would tell you that left tackle is one of the 5 hardest positions in the NFL to find long-term stability and replacement. And if Bernard Ryman is playing at a continued level that we have seen before, going into this season and through this season, and you allow him yet another opportunity to showcase himself, that price tag ain't going down. The only way that Bernard Ryman's value decreases between now and whenever the Colts decide to sign him is if he's injured. And in that case, it doesn't help anybody. There's no, then you're back to square one anyway. I think you lock him in now because his value is only going to increase. It's only going to increase. And obviously, if he has a career-ending injury, then, that's one of those things that exists in football, that threat, that risk. But by the way, my computer here, Eddie, and I think this might mean it's incorrect. My computer says it's 53 degrees outside. Now, that's not right?
I think that's pretty
Celsius,
accurate.
I think.
I think that's
accurate.
Celsius.
Pretty sure that's Celsius. It still thinks I'm in Manchester. That's what it is. It still thinks I'm in Manchester, and that's Celsius. It's not even humidity. That's not even humidity percentage.
So
Stephanie White.
If it was 55 Celsius outside, you would be in 131 degree Fahrenheit.
That's about right then, right? I think that's right. That's exactly what it is. The heat index, I don't know if you know this or not, heat index today, 161. Did you know that?
Whew.
It feels like that. Now, temperature is just simply a measurement of what the air feels like, so I don't know how the temperature could then have a feels like. How can you have a feels like of what it feels like?
You need to ask one of your meteorologist friends.
You know what? Stephanie White went to Purdue, and they have a great meteorology school. I'll ask her. Do you think she'll know?
Maybe.
I'll ask her. Stephanie White, head coach of the Fever, next. We asked Fever head coach Stephanie White last week what artist she would like to hear again when we bring her on. She said Adele, but she actually thought about it for 2.5 minutes. So I think that means that we're now out of options. So do we just go back to, what are we doing, Eddie, next week? Do we go back to Kenny Chesney again? Is that what we do?
I'm not sure.
Do we play the theme to Shawshank? We can't play Oasis, right? We know that. We ruled that out, okay? The Fever in action tonight taking on Las Vegas. It is the Stranger Things jersey return for the Fever. Tonight joining us now on the program, head coach of the Fever, who stand at 12-12 after dropping one to New York in their last outing. Coach, I'm going to begin with this before we get into basketball. I was just saying, I'd like to know, and I'm going to trust you. Now, when you were a student and basketball player at Purdue, your major was what?
Aviation for my first 2 years in college, yes, and then communications my last 2 years.
Okay, so aviation is Purdue is, I mean, it goes without saying, right? I mean, you've got two of the most famous aviators in world history, both from Purdue. When you were in aviation, did you have to take any sort of like meteorology classes or science of the atmosphere type classes?
Absolutely did. Yes, we had to take meteorology. We had to take all of that. Had to learn about engines too. In fact, I had to take apart and put together a car engine so I could figure out how the engines worked with all the pistons and everything else. And so it was quite comprehensive, not just touch and goes when you're taking off and landing in airplanes.
So do you know, the reason I ask, do you have any idea within any sort of ballpark of accuracy how you translate Celsius to Fahrenheit temperatures?
Absolutely not, because we learn it in the the American Fahrenheit back in the old days.
Of course. And, I go over, like I went to England for that concert, and they're like, now dress appropriately. It's going to be 31 Fahrenheit. And I'm like, wow, it's freezing. And I find out it's 110. I have no idea.
Right.
So my point being, right now outside, or they said 31 Celsius, and that's like, I mean, I don't know what that translates to, but it was hot, right? So I'm assuming right now it's very high in Celsius because it is very warm. But let's get to engines and talking about that. There is a big question mark in regards to one of the most important pistons within the engine of the Fever, that of Caitlin Clark. Where do we stand? What is the latest you can tell us on what she has learned in seeking medical opinion about the injury she's dealing with?
I see what you did there too. That was really good.
That's the second part. That's that communication.
Too, so.
I know that. See, I got into the communication aspect of the degree also there, right?
You did. It was pretty good. But no new information outside of what we thought when she went to see the doctor. I mean, everything is pretty much on par with just aggravation of that right groin. And right now there's no timetable for a return. I think one of the things that's so important is because there have been multiple soft tissue injuries, is that we make sure, number one, that she's fully healed, comfortable, confident when she comes back, and number two, that we take our time. I know she wants to play. I know we want her to play, but there have been multiple setbacks, to this point. So I want to just make sure that we give it its due and give it its time to heal as she continues to rehab, recover, strength train, and build endurance again for when that return to play timetable comes about.
When you were seeking more opinion, Coach, were you, in other words, when you heard back that there was kind of nothing new to report, was that a good thing or a bad thing? In other words, is there a frustration of not knowing exactly what it is, or was there a relief in knowing that it was not more complex than you might have thought?
Yeah, I mean, I think always when you're an athlete or just a human being, right, you want to have more than one or two opinions, particularly when your body is your vessel. It's what you do for your profession. And so, making sure that she got multiple opinions from some of the best in the business, and I think it's a relief to know that there's nothing worse than what you had anticipated. At least I'm speaking from my perspective. I would never speak for Caitlin, but I also think with soft tissue injuries, there's always a little bit of frustration because it's never one thing or another. When you sprain an ankle or when you have another injury that's pretty cut and dry. You have a clear timetable. You understand what you're dealing with and how you attack that process. And with soft tissue injuries, they're so complex. They're so frustrating and challenging, and they really do just continue to nag until you have that time to shut it down.
From your perspective, and again, I'm not asking you to speak for Caitlin Clark, but from your perspective, Stephanie White, as an athlete, how do you think she's doing, just in terms of the frustration, the timeline, and everything that goes into dealing with something that she did not have to deal with a lot in college, and that is this navigating through missing time?
Yeah, I'm sure it's frustration. Every competitor wants to be out there on the floor doing what they love. Certainly I know that, and to be able to do it, at a high level and feeling comfortable and confident in your body and what you can do. So I'm sure that there's frustration. I'm also sure that there's frustration dealing with multiple times, and adding to that, having All-Star in Indianapolis and, not being able to participate. But at the same time, being an athlete, you understand that there are times where this is going to happen. Injuries happen, setbacks happen. Fortunately for Caitlin, she hasn't experienced a lot of injury and a lot of setbacks. Fortunately for her, she also has a staff full of players who have experienced a lot of injuries, between myself and Breon January and Karima Christmas-Kelly. And so, our ability to help her navigate through the highs and lows of what it means to rehab, recover, and the frustrations of, being in and out of the lineup and on the floor.
Fever back in action tonight, taking on Las Vegas. Stephanie White, their head coach, is our guest here on Query and Company. You come off of, after getting to the 500 mark, dropping back-to-back to New York. In terms of that particular matchup, what things can you learn from that in terms of what the Liberty were able to do, or areas where you fell short that are areas that you look at and say, okay, learning example here that we need to take away from this is blank? That would be what?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, you can't. The margin for error is so small. We had about for 35 minutes of that ball game. We were really good. And against teams like New York, you can't afford to have those 4 to 5 minute stretches where you struggle. Because they're so dangerous. I mean, they've got like 6 Olympians on that team, from various countries around the world, and their depth and their ability to play inside and outside, with John Quill Jones returning especially. So you can't afford to have those lapses. The last 2.5 minutes of the third quarter, they went on a 9-0 run, and they were able to carry that over into the first 2.5, 3 minutes of the fourth quarter. And against those teams, that just puts you in a bind, puts you in a hole. That's again a growing area for our team. They've got world champions and Olympic champions on their team, so they understand those moments. And we've got to continue to grow through those and shorten those. We know teams are good. New York is one of the best. Obviously, they were WNBA champions a year ago. But we've got to be able to find ways to navigate runs and to minimize runs.
You've got a good roster, obviously. I mean, it goes without saying. And I think Ari McDonald, as you've talked about, has been a really good pickup for you guys. Aaliyah Boston's played well. Kelsey Mitchell goes without saying. But Caitlin Clark is so important, Coach, and we know that, okay? From a coaching standpoint, how do you kind of navigate through making sure that you have a group that is aware of the fact that they have a job to do even without one of those Pistons, while at the same time knowing that when that Piston comes back, you have to immediately, and the time is running out on the acclimation period. So how do you keep the focus there within the group that is playing?
Well, I mean, we talk about controlling the things that we can control, and this is a group who won the Commissioner's Cup. While Caitlin was not able to play, this is a group who found a little bit of groove, during that time frame, understanding what it takes, being able to continue to play confident. I thought there was a stretch there in that game against New York where we passed up open shots. We second guessed a little bit in ways that we shouldn't and couldn't. So making sure we stay confident in one another, stay confident in our process, stay connected with one another, knowing that we have pieces that it takes to be able to be successful and put ourselves in position for success. And then when Caitlin comes back, it's the reacclimation period. The thing about bringing Caitlin back and losing Caitlin in the lineup is that she's got the ball in her hands a lot. So the things that we run, the way that the ball moves, the attack from defenses is different. And our looks on the floor are different. Her gravity is so great that it changes the dynamics of how teams play us and what we tend to get And so that is the single toughest thing with her in and out of the lineup. But, we have the pieces that have found success, and, just being able to stay confident throughout the ebbs and flows of a game is important.
As a competitor, Stephanie White, our guest, head coach of the Indiana Fever. As a competitor, Stephanie, when you look back at your career, whether it be as a player or a coach, I think one thing that makes all elite level athletes, the same is just the competitive nature and focus. When you look at yourself, would you say that you were more driven by chasing the feeling of the top of competition, or by learning from and never letting go of your failure?
I think probably the never letting go of the failure, because if you ask most competitors, those are the ones that they remember. You don't remember a lot of the wins. Heck, sometimes you don't even remember the championships unless they're the big ones. Like if you ask me about conference championships in college, I don't really remember. But the national championship is the one I do. But I remember the game where I had a double-double and one of them was turnovers, and the game where I didn't make a field goal at Notre Dame my junior year, or the game where I had 8 turnovers my freshman year when we were playing in a Vegas tournament. You remember the negative stuff. You remember the failures. You remember the setbacks, and that drives you to be better. At least for me, that's what it was. And when you chase success and you chase titles and you chase all of that, I mean, that's ultimately, it's the end game. It's what you dream of, but ultimately you're chasing the best version of yourself. You're chasing that elusive perfection that you're never going to get. You're chasing growth. You're chasing being better than you were the last game, or being better than you were the previous year. The result of that oftentimes ends up being championships or individual awards or whatever it may be. But it's the drive to be the best that you can be that you chase, and it's fueled by the failures that you've had along the way.
Have you had games where your team won, but you felt like it was a failure because they didn't do something that needed to be worked on?
Yeah, for sure. I think a prime example of that is our last Dallas game. We were up big in the first half, and we came out in the second half and just kind of played the game. I felt like that was an opportunity for us to really learn what it meant to stay sharp, to not play the score. They may have even outscored us by a couple in the second half. The last, I think, 4 or 5 minutes of the ball game wasn't as sharp and crisp as it needed to be. And that's the growth process of a team that hasn't won championships, right? It's like you have to approach the game, the possession, the same way, no matter what, in ways that you see the New York, the Minnesotas, doing, the Vegases, doing. And I think that's, again, a growth process for our team. And, I always say this, and I know it sounds cliche, but it's true. There's no substitute for experience. And when you haven't experienced that at this level, you have to grow through it. You have to learn it. It's not something that's just innate in most players.
The Stephanie White is our coach, of course, or our guest, I should say, the coach for the Indiana Fever, our coach as well for the Indiana Fever. Tonight, back in action, taking on Las Vegas and getting back into things. So you would like to see what tonight? Obviously a win, but coming off of it now, 12-12, the big thing that you want to see that is going to show you that things are indeed coming off the right direction, coming off the 2 losses to New York, would be what?
I want to see us with our defensive execution. I want our defensive execution to be elite. Our point of attack, our disruption, I want them to feel us. Nothing easy. I want to make sure that we make them work for everything that they get, that they take the shots that we're willing to live with. And I want to see us take care of the ball, give ourselves opportunities for high-quality shots, and make sure that we value every possession.
Stephanie White, head coach, Indiana Fever. All right, lastly and most importantly, next time that we have a conversation with you, we've done Kenny Chesney, we've done Adele. What's next?
I think we got to go Jimmy Buffett.
All right. Now, wait. We can't go – here's the thing, though. We can't go Cheeseburger in Paradise or Margaritaville because that's too obvious, right?
Okay, let's go come Monday. Let's go come Monday.
All right, fair enough. We can do that one. We can do Jimmy Buffett is one of those. You mentioned it. We talked about it earlier. I mean, it was, I should say, a fabulous concert. And didn't everybody in college at some point go through a phase where somebody just had like the Jimmy Buffett's greatest hits, and everybody thought it was new, and you didn't realize you were listening to stuff from 15 years ago? You know what I mean?
No doubt. Exactly. No question.
Back in the days when you were taking apart engines and putting them back together. I like it. And now, of course, trying to get that engine fine-tuned for the Indiana Fever tonight against Las Vegas. Coach, appreciate it, all right?
All right, thanks, Jake.
It's Stephanie White joining us on the program. And again, to recap the big news off the top there, no new information learned about the injury of Caitlin Clark in terms of the other opinions medically speaking, and no necessarily new way in which going about things. In other words, that they know no more in terms of a time frame of her return. Eddie, we talked about it. You, of course, will be on the pregame and postgame broadcast tonight for the Indiana Fever, and one of the things I think becomes a challenge is just trying to figure out exactly when you then kind of say to yourself, this is who we're going to have to now just defer to who we are without Caitlin Clark, because you want her on the floor, obviously, but you've got to still use this particular group and find the ways that this group plays without her, but you don't necessarily want to completely focus moving forward on being a Caitlin Clark-less team. I think that balance, Eddie, is one of the things that's tough.
I thought they took a step in the right direction in that game against the Liberty, because even though they lose the game, they were in control of it for the first 2.5 quarters, and then things kind of shifted in the final, 4 minutes of the third and certainly at the start of the fourth quarter, and it felt like they had figured things out, and then they just kind of hit a lull, and that was the lull where they could have used a Caitlin Clark, and I believe this group, because it's a lot of veteran-type players. You've got Aaliyah Boston, Sophie Cunningham, Kelsey Mitchell, Natasha Howard, etc., where they can learn from these mistakes and these shortcomings to better them in the future, just because that is how things are going to have to be at the time right now, and you got to find a way to string together some wins to improve your playoff positioning, so when Caitlin Clark does come back, you can pick up right where you left off.
Yeah, look, a very, very important piece, no question about that. And again, I go back to the one thing, and there is a bit of a timeline that goes on with this. The one thing that I kind of hope in all of this is that if you are the Fever, you look at it and you say, if we're getting everybody else involved and we're playing without Caitlin Clark, then when she comes back, you can still continue with that same modus operandi as long as she is coming in as facilitator first. Isn't that a word, modus operandi? Did I say that incorrectly?
I don't know. I just hadn't heard that before.
Eddie, I was an English major in college, which means when you're an English major, one of two things can. Very, very well said. Actually, good point, because I was an English major, and then towards the end there, I had to switch, because to have an English degree, you had to have 8 semesters of foreign language, and I had 4 semesters of Spanish, and then I had 3 semesters of Swahili, and it was no longer offered. So I would have had to go back and redo and start all over again with a second foreign language. And you can guess what the odds of that were. So I had to switch the major in order to complete my degree and graduate. But that's why, kids, you don't take a 31-year delay in the process. But as an English major, one thing I've learned, you can use words every once in a while that people are unfamiliar with. And if you make up words or say them incorrectly, you get benefited out because you're an English major, right?
I guess that's true.
Yeah. So having said that, It feels to me like if you just go on and say, we're going to play under the assumption that we're not going to have Caitlin Clark for a while, and then when she does return, you have her return as the point guard facilitator to simply continue running the engine as it's been running, and then you start to allow her to get her shots and get her offensively, her scoring aspect of it. If you just airdrop her back in as a scorer, when you have a group that has been scoring without her, then I think that's where it becomes more complicated, if that makes sense what I'm saying. Again, we're at Colts Camp Grand Park up in Westfield. It is, I will admit, it doesn't feel as bad because there is a breeze now, but it is definitely warm outside. And I want to remind everybody and let you know, if you're watching on the YouTube, and we thank you for doing so.
Are you going to smile at the camera? And
hang on.
There you go.
You ready?
Position yourself.
Now, it's radio, so not very many people can see this. But if you're watching later on, and we hope that you do, watching on the YouTube, you ready?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. This looks like I'm getting ready to down a bottle of tequila. It totally looks that way. And you said today's National Tequila Day?
It is indeed. It is indeed.
This is just good old artesian water. That means it's out of a well somewhere. I don't know where. I've always thought that would it be illegal to do this? Could you just start bottling water out of your faucet and come up with a company and sell it?
Oh, my. Wouldn't you have
Would
to put
anybody
the
know the difference?
ingredients?
Honestly.
You would have to put the
Huh?
ingredients on it, wouldn't you?
H2O. 2 hydrogen, 1 oxygen. What ingredients and what else is there? It's tap water.
Well, I don't know if
water's all the same.
I don't know if the FDA would approve of that.
Why not? I mean, the FDA allows you to drink it at home, right? I don't think it has fluoride in it anymore, does it? Didn't we take that out? Just H2O. That's all you need. Literally, you just put it right there in the tap. Tell people it's from the flowing springs of Meridian Kessler. Who knows the difference,
What
right?
do we got going on in the background there? It sounds like we got some hammering and nails going on.
There is. I am in a. Okay, to set the scene here, at Grand Park in Westfield. If you have been for Colts camp, you obviously have the main practice field. The north end of that practice field in the end zone, just behind the end zone, is a row. There are, I believe, 4 rather large tents. Those tents have the front side of it opens up towards the field. The back side of it, if you so choose, you can close that, and then the people that are behind on Touchdown Town can't see across into the practice field. We have both areas open for the obvious reason because, like I mentioned earlier, I am Matt Damon in The Martian. It's 162 degrees here. And just beside me there is one other tent, and the vinyl paneling of that tent in the wind is slapping against the tent that I'm in.
Okay, I didn't know
That's
if
what you're
Casey
hearing.
Valier and Matt Taylor returned and they were just trying to put that table together that they picked up and carried out.
Casey Valier and Matt Taylor, indeed, about an hour ago, picked up their table and simply left. Now, Casey Valier, I'm watching right now. He is leaving altogether. He is packed up. He's got all his stuff. There are 2 areas of motion right now at Grand Park. One is Casey Valier leaving the practice facility. The other is the truck that is coming and changing out the portalettes. It's got 2 of them on the back. I'm hoping that there are no potholes. That would be ugly. And Matt Taylor is here, and Matt Taylor is actually going to join us coming up just about 5 minutes from now. We will get you caught up on everything that's been going on at Colts camp. We'll get Matt Taylor's reaction and thoughts on this day number 2 of practice. There was one player that continues to kind of shine. There was one player that shows a little bit of inconsistency and had a hiccup today. There is one player that earlier told us that even though he is in a contract year, things are getting interesting because his agent tells him that he and the Colts are not on the same page, quote, unquote, and that from a numbers standpoint, they are not close. I'm talking about Bernard Ryman, who made that comment to us just before the show began today. We aired that interview at about 12:30. That is available in podcast form at 1075thefan.com. But Bernard Ryman, when I asked him about the contract status and being in a contract year, and he said, I let someone else deal with that, but it is my understanding is, and I'm paraphrasing, that we are not close. And I said, he said, we are not on the same page. That's what it was. We are not on the same page. I then immediately deferred back in my mind to the situation with Ryan Kelly a year ago, where Chris Ballard made it very clear during camp that they did not want to have that negotiation at that time, but would rather table that discussion. Obviously, you saw that Ryan Kelly, they decided to go in another direction at the center position. I cannot foresee any way, shape, or form that the Colts are looking to go on to any other situation at left tackle other than Bernard Ryman. So I asked him, do you mean that when you say you're not on the same page, that they're not willing to have that conversation right now, or do you mean the numbers are not the same? And he said, I mean the numbers are not close. So that's where things stand with Bernard Ryman. Matt Taylor is the voice of the Colts. I think he's still here. I'll corral him, and we'll talk to him next. It is, in fact, Tequila Day. National Tequila Day, apparently. Big news of the day, and I'm not drinking tequila. It's bottled water that looks like it's in a tequila bottle. But I can even show you. It says artisan water right there. I didn't, put it, Cuervo in there. But nonetheless, important to stay hydrated on a hot day like today. Some of the big news items from the day if you are just joining the show.
Where have you been?
Thank you, Eddie. Stephanie White mentioned earlier that Caitlin Clark, there is no new update after getting various opinions on her injury. No update on her status. In addition to that, other news that is of note, Hulk Hogan passing away today. That news coming out, and that's obviously a big one within the American pop culture landscape, certainly of the 80s. I think his star really launched when he was Thunderlips in Rocky III in 1982, and then, of course, it goes without saying when he beat the Iron Sheik in professional wrestling, got the belt, and it became not just a wrestling star, but a pop cultural icon in reality television, politics, all of it. Hulk Hogan passing away. We are at Colts Camp Grand Park in Westfield. Practice number 2 is in the books. Matt Taylor is the radio voice of the Indianapolis Colts, joins us here. And Matt, we'll begin simply with this, and that is we talked yesterday in practice number 1 of some of the things that we saw. Things that jumped out at you today in practice number 2.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that the defense is probably ahead of the offense. They certainly took advantage of the offense at times today, and that's to be expected because – you're putting in a new scheme, yes, but there's also a lot of continuity on that side of the ball. The offense is changing out the quarterbacks. There's this switch up between Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones, but it's pretty clear to me early on through two days that you can already start to see the defensive schematic change on that side of the ball. The secondary is sticky, a lot of press man-to-man, and just to put it simply, Charvarius Ward is going to be really good.
Can I actually ask you, and Matt, and I apologize for this, but in all honesty, and I'm going to do this for people that are listening that maybe you're not the everyday, every moment NFL fans, which I think the vast majority of people are, okay? But when you hear a defense that is, quote, press man-to-man versus, say, a cover 2 or a zone coverage, can you explain, your wife's a teacher, right?
Yep. Used to be.
What's that?
Used to be, yeah.
Well, before you became the voice of the Colts, right? I mean, let's be honest.
No.
Let's be real here. I mean,
she needed a change.
No, I understand. But if you were to talk to her class and explain to them what you mean when you say press man and sticky, you mean what?
Well, the Colts have notorious the last couple of seasons under 2 different regimes defensively, Matt Eberflus and Gus Bradley. They've been heavy zone defense, and what they're trying to do is make life more difficult for the opposing quarterback and to make those throwing lanes, decrease those, and get more hands on the football. So by press man-to-man, it's your man up on, your man.
So you're in charge of a guy instead of an area.
Yeah, man on man, and you're up on them at the line of scrimmage, and you're trying to, what we used to call when I played, reroute a guy. If they're trying to hit their spot in the secondary, trying to get to a certain place to make their cut and make their break, you want to reroute them to throw off the timing of the play. So rules-wise, you're allowed to be up on a guy within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, and guys are really good at that. Like Charvarius Ward, I think Juju Brents can really excel at that. Jalen Jones, I think, is getting better at that. But they just haven't done a lot of that in recent past.
Because instead what they were doing was doing area by committee, right? Of, hey, I'm in charge of this square area, and then as soon as my guy goes out of it, then Matt comes over, and he's in charge of that guy now.
Yeah, a lot of zone coverage, a lot of cover 2, a lot of cover 3 under Gus Bradley, some cover 4 as well. But to put it simply, they want to make life more difficult for the opposition because it's been frustrating. You and I have talked about this. The hallmarks of the defense the last couple of years have been the other team's best player offensively, primarily skill player-wise at receiver, have gone off against the Colts. Going in, when you play the Texans, you got to stop Nico Collins. When you play the Jaguars twice a year, you got to stop Brian Thomas Jr. And those guys are going over 100 yards, and they're scoring touchdowns, and they're making big plays. So they want to be a little bit more game-specific within this defense, and they want to play more press man. When you don't blitz as often as the Colts did not under Gus Bradley, and you sit back and you play zone defense behind it, it led to the other team's quarterback completing right around 70% of their throws for the season. Just too many easy throws, too many ways to get into a rhythm and build timing and things like that throughout the course of the game. So what they want to do is get up on receivers, take them away. In the case of Charvarius Ward, maybe he shadows a receiver and just completely follows that guy no matter where he's lining up formationally. But at the very least, his addition takes away one half of the field in the secondary.
What player defensively for the Colts? Matt Taylor, the voice of the Colts, is our guest here. We're at Grand Park, practice number 2 in the books for the Colts. They get back on the practice field tomorrow from 10 until roughly 11:15. Is there a player that you look at, Matt, defensively in a zone system that was a really good player, and now you have a big question mark as to whether or not that transfers to them playing more into a man coverage?
No, I don't really. I mean, it's a really good question, but I don't think that, the Colts had, for lack of a better term, like specific zone guys, and then they have specific man-to-man guys. I do think bringing in
Do
Ward,
some defenses, do you think? Do some franchises do it that way?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't think so. I think it's more of, this is sort of who we are. This is our scheme, and we want to be game specific, but we also don't want to just change everything that we do from an implementation standpoint within our scheme, if that makes sense. But I do know, talking with the guys individually, they're really excited to be able to be a little bit more aggressive. Take things to the offense, right? Let's dictate terms to them instead of maybe the other way around. So, I mean, I talked to Juju Brents in the offseason. He was really excited, and he's perfect for this because he's long. He's got long arms. He's got adequate speed. I think he can really excel playing press man. Ward definitely can. Jalen Jones can. I mean, Justin Wally, based on what we've seen so far, he can excel doing no matter what scheme you have and no matter where you line him up positionally, because he can play outside, he can play inside too. So I do think personnel-wise, the Colts have the pieces in place to pull this off, and they also want to disguise things in the secondary, line up different places, and kind of cloud that picture for the quarterback pre-snap, just create a little bit of a shadow of a doubt. That's what they did.
We'll take any shadow we can get out here. Right?
Today we will, no question. But, I mean, that's what Cincinnati did when they were humming, when they went to the AFC Championship game 2 years in a row, advanced to the Super Bowl. They were able to beat Patrick Mahomes just by clouding that picture just enough pre-snap at the line of scrimmage by, rolling a different way or lining up a different spot or bringing a guy or dropping a guy back. So they made it a big emphasis in the offseason to bring in guys that can do that have experience, that are savvy, and they're more playmakers.
Now, wait a minute. I'm curious here. You have a training camp. It says training camp official, your credential.
Yeah.
It's got the big Colts fancy lanyard.
Yeah.
Mine just says training camp media. Now, what's the difference? What makes you official and me media?
Well, I do know this got me in the suite the other day, so maybe that's the difference. I was able to walk up the stairs, say hi to
Really?
I was able to say hi to your guy, Mark Janes. Yesterday,
Well, how'd
he was
get
up in
there?
the suite. I don't know. He's got connections.
I mean, what's going on here?
He was up there with Lance Shive, and
I went to the portal yesterday. It was locked. Well, I mean,
that's the difference.
Yeah.
That's-
We're solving all kinds of problems out here, right?
I'm official to go to the bathroom, and
You're obviously getting the man press credential, and I'm trying to walk around here in a zone, right? I'm old news. I'm yesterday's
There's
stuff.
a lot of grass around here,
Hey, I'm curious of this, and I don't know how to word this, so you tell me if this makes sense. I've thought a lot about this quarterback situation, and I think we know that the ceiling for Anthony Richardson maybe is higher than the ceiling for Daniel Jones, or maybe we have a better idea of the ceiling of Daniel Jones because he's been able to show that a little bit with New York before he came here.
Right.
But even though I realize this is a legitimate open quarterback competition, it feels to me like Daniel Jones can't necessarily win the competition. It's rather he wins it only if Anthony Richardson loses. And does that make sense? Like you defer to Jones as your fallback in case the guy that you have handed the keys to very early on and has all the tools doesn't take advantage of that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. This to me all goes back to the whole idea of a quarterback competition, and they really announced this to the world at the Combine. And I remember being on Radio Row at the Combine and talking to national people, and there was a lot of people that we interviewed and had on our airwaves that were critical of this. Like this whole concept of, if anything, Anthony Richardson just needs more time on task. Why he's been injured and, you've taken him off the field because of lack of preparation issues, or just there's a little bit of a disconnect in terms of getting ready for games, Monday through Saturday, whatever the case is. He's just missed a lot of time on the field. And some people were like, why bring in another quarterback to take valuable reps away from him in the spring and in training camp when all he does is need reps? He needs more experience. And I get that. I really do. I think that's a fair argument. But on the other hand, I agree with what the Colts are doing in this situation, in that, listen, man, you've missed the playoffs 4 years in a row. It's time to go, right? You haven't won a division since 2014. Every other team in your division's won at least twice. Haven't won a playoff game since 2018. Like, there's a lot of urgency. And this is the NFL. It stands for not for long. And quite frankly, jobs are on the line. Everybody knows that. So what are you going to do with Anthony Richardson? Are you just going to hope that it works out? Or do you need to have competition for him in order to push him to become a better player? But also, too, to have an insurance package, because he's missed – he's played less than half of his available starts, available to him, I should say, in his first 2 years. So you have to have Daniel Jones in here to compete and push him, but also, if Richardson continues to get hurt, a guy that can play and has played at a high level in spurts so far in his NFL career.
I want to ask you about a couple of guys that have jumped out so far in this camp, but we got to squeeze one in real quick. Squeeze in a break real quick. Do you got time to stick around for 15 more minutes?
Absolutely.
All right, I want to talk to Matt Taylor about a couple of guys that I think have jumped out a little bit here, and maybe some that we're waiting to jump start, even though it's only been 2 practices. We'll do it other side as we return to Grand Park. Colts camp, day number 2 here. Query and Company on the Fan. It is indeed great balls of fire out here. We should probably play the Hulk Hogan theme at some point a couple times too today in honor of Hulk Hogan passing away. If you were just joining us, that news coming out just as we were going on today. Matt Taylor back with us here. We're at Colts Camp Grand Park up in Westfield. Day number 2 in the books. All right, let me throw you a couple of guys. You tell me what jumped out, okay?
Yep.
From the get-go, from the very get-go, and we interviewed him right after the draft, and I thought he was a fun interview. But Justin Wally appears to be a guy that at least off-field, Chris Ballard and the Colts brass are very high on.
Yep.
Has that translated to him getting opportunity here on-field?
Oh, definitely, without question. No Kenny Moore today. I don't know if it was a rest day or what, but
Kenny Moore was one of 4 veterans that did a rest day.
Yep.
Those 4 that did not practice today: DeForest Buckner, Tyquan Lewis, Kenny Moore, and Braden Smith.
There you go. But it's pretty clear through 2 days, and then you couple this with what we saw in the spring. Justin Wally he's made a really good first impression. They trust him with a lot of stuff, versatility-wise. He's playing outside. He's playing inside. Doesn't appear too big for him. And it's just a classic case of just be ready for anything. And when opportunity comes, you have to seize it. And during the spring, Juju Brents was dealing with something minor. Jalen Jones was dealing with something minor. And here comes Justin Wally in OTAs out there with the first-team defense. He's, banging around, clanging around on Michael Pittman Jr., gets his hands on the ball, takes it away from Josh Downs in a drill back in the spring, and he just parlayed that right into intermixing with the first-team defense right away here at the beginning of training camp. And I just go back to draft night, day 2 of the draft. Jake, I don't know if you subscribe to, all the Draftnik stuff. I try to read a lot, so nothing to me is total gospel. But depending on what you read on Justin Wally coming out of the draft, he was either going to be a 3rd-round pick, a late day 2 guy, or he could be an early day 3 guy, or some had him as like a round 6, round 7. And the Colts were pretty honest. We're like, we don't really care what other people say. We were going to draft him where we had him slotted. And we thought about taking him higher compared to where they did in the 3rd round. And I'm paraphrasing here, but Chris Ballard said, I couldn't stand the thought of losing this guy. I don't think I could have slept draft night missing out on a chance to draft Justin Wally. So they're that high on him. So it's pretty clear right away that he's going to have a role.
Tyler Warren.
Jim Bob Cooter said today, and I think it's pretty accurate, like once we get the pads on, you're going to see Tyler Warren start to come alive a little bit. Not that he's not making an impact already, but you're going to see that physicality and that versatility really start to shine once you start putting the pads on and things ramp up in terms of physicality.
Does he strike you more as a Dallas Clark across the middle in stride receiver or a Kobe Fleener hybrid tight end that is more of a receiver?
Yeah, definitely Dallas Clark. Yeah, to me, he reminds me of a guy, I said this when he was drafted, because just watching his film, and I'll be honest with you, I'll raise my hand, like I didn't know who Tyler Warren was this time last year.
Right.
And I don't think a lot of people did either, because he was behind some really good players at Penn State, and just this past season, who catches 100 passes as a tight end? It's
and they used him everywhere, right?
They used him everywhere. To me, my coming out party or my enlightenment on Tyler Warren was that USC game. Right. I'm down in Tennessee getting ready to play the Titans. I'm in a hotel in Nashville just watching college football, and I see that USC game where he lines up at center. They do the double pass, and then he goes down the field and he catches that ball in the end zone with 2 linebackers draped on him. I'm like, who the hell is this guy?
Right.
He's got like 14 catches in this game or something ridiculous. So, I think he reminds me of a guy that could play in 2025 or a guy in 1975. Like, he's just that physically gifted. He doesn't shy away from contact, and he's just that athletic too.
Okay, Daniel Jones.
Daniel Jones, he to me, he is looking like the Daniel Jones who we saw back in OTAs. And the biggest compliment I can give to him is that he, back in the spring, did not look at all like a guy who's been here only since March. Really good command of the huddle, really good command of the playbook. And we forget, too, that Daniel Jones twice in his career has completed over 65% of his passes. If you have that level of completion percentage on this team last year.
And some of that's rhythm passing, right?
Yeah, a lot of it, to be fair, has been short, intermediate. But
you kind of want that, right?
But where did the Colts struggle last year?
Right, that's what I mean.
Yeah. So if they would have had his, and I'm going to use this word, and it's going to sound like I'm slighting him, but I don't really mean to at all. But if you would have had his efficiency and his competence last year, I think they win 10 games.
Okay, lastly, and we got to do it quick, Anthony Richardson.
Anthony, I think,
threw a pick today, right?
Threw an interception today. So, yesterday had some drops. He suffered some drops by his receivers that didn't do him any favors because, Jake, everybody out here is keeping track of the completion percentage and, completions versus attempts. So, I think it's just, listen, everybody's got a job to do, and you got to get clicks, and there's so much content between now and the start of the season.
You're doing a lot of that lately. Matt tells me you've become almost like a Taylor Swift.
That's it, yeah.
And level of you're an influencer now, right?
But I just mean you're not really going to know until you start playing regular season games. Even these preseason games, the picture's going to be incomplete because you're not going up against a live defense. You're not making checks in the line of scrimmage 100% of the time, things like that. So I hate to say it, but, we're not going to have a full picture on who these guys are and which guy wins the quarterback job and the sustainability of that until we start playing regular season games.
Appreciate you sticking around late. I'm sure with that new credential you've got there, you can go up into the air-conditioned suites now if you'd like, right?
I'll get you some more tequila.
That's right. It's National Tequila Day, right? All right, Matt, appreciate it, man.
My pleasure.
Matt Taylor, voice of the Colts. We'll go back and talk a little college football. We did it yesterday with Indiana, and boiler up. We'll talk a little Purdue next. Back in the day when I worked at the cigar store, Hardwick's Pipe and Tobacco, best job I've ever had. All apologies in respect to the one that I currently hold, but it was a great job. And on Friday nights, Gia Burns, whose younger sister Francie was a schoolmate of mine at North Central, but Gia Burns did a jazz program on one of the local radio stations, and we would play that station in the store. And every Friday night I would call, it became kind of a running gag, and request that song from Chuck Mangione. And news coming out today from his family confirming that 85-year-old Chuck Mangione passed away on, I believe, Tuesday, but the announcement from the family coming today. That is one of the great songs, Feels So Good, from Chuck Mangione, that reminds me of just like being hauled around in the back of my mom's car as a kid. And think of it every time. Puts you in a good place. So Chuck Mangione passing away, though, at the age of 85. Hulk Hogan also, that announcement earlier today, passing away. Joining us now on the program, we are at Grand Park in Westfield. You can hear they're actually mowing the field for Colts camp. Practice number 2 is in the books. But Big Ten Media Day is taking place out in Las Vegas, the only place on earth. Actually, I take that back. Even in Las Vegas, if they come to Indianapolis, they would find it hot. Right now, if we went to Vegas, I'd think, oh, that's great. Somebody turn on the air conditioning. Tom Bernhard, our friend from Gold and Black, is out there talking Purdue football. Tom, I'll be honest with you. You tell me if you agree or disagree with this statement, but I would assume that of all the years you have covered Purdue football, this one may be as enigmatic as any of them in trying to determine exactly what kind of team you've got that you're going to cover this year.
Yeah, no idea. First of all, Jake, I want to say I am still alive, thank gosh. And
yeah, sorry about that on the intro, right?
you got Ozzy Osbourne too, my friend. But I digress.
Malcolm Jamal Warner. It's 4 now. They usually come in 3s. Now it's 4, right?
I know. It's crazy. But, yeah, I've got no idea, Jake. I'd be lying to you if I said I knew what was going to happen this fall in West Lafayette. Over 50 portal transfers, of course, to all the freshmen here. I think 70 newcomers overall. So just a real roster undergone a lot of tumult. So, yeah, how will the chemistry develop? Who knows? Who's going to be the quarterback? Who knows? How will the schemes work? Who knows? On top of all that, Jake, the schedule is awful difficult too.
Okay, so let's talk about the schedule itself. And I want to get into one area that I think there is some familiarity for Purdue. But if you were to talk about the schedule itself, you know, it's such a tradition-laden schedule. Like when you look, for example, at the fact of Notre Dame being on the roster, on the schedule, that's one of them that you look at Notre Dame and you're like, okay, you gotta keep that. I realize, but that is a daunting one. But it's just before that as well. The fact that you sneak in USC when you're in conference play and you start out with Ball State and Southern Illinois. And then you got to go at Michigan. You got to go at Washington. You've got Ohio State at home. It's going to be really tough, is it not, for even Barry Odom to get an idea of who they are?
Yeah, and plus Indiana and Illinois are now still in the top 25, top 15 teams in the country as well. So lots of heavy lifting, like you said. Just a tall order for Barry Odom in year one. He's confident, Jake. We talked to him just moments ago, sort of off stage. He goes on stage here 11:45 Pacific time on the big stage, the big dais. But we talked to him again, and he talked about that non-conference schedule a little bit. No plans for Purdue to alter its non-conference schedule, at least for the foreseeable future. Who knows what college football will look like for the next few years anyway, but he knows what he's up against. But, Barry Odom, you talked to him, he's ready to embrace those challenges. And he knows there are many. And I think he was on Indianapolis radio, too, and talked about the quarterback situation as well. That's going to be very interesting to see how it sorts out with Ryan Brown and Malachi Singleton, of course, being the two primary contenders for that job. And Jake, I think when push comes to shove, Ryan Brown's going to be your guy.
When you look at Purdue, Tom Bernhard, our guest from Gold and Black, we're talking about Purdue. He's out. Tom is at Big Ten Media Days out in Las Vegas, the convenient locale for the Big Ten of Las Vegas. When you look at the roster, the one thing that jumps out at me, Devin Mockabee has been a really, really good player and just a solid guy that I think can get you yards and you can salt clock with him. And I think that because there's familiarity there, maybe that's what you really ride because you know what he can do in the Big Ten. But can you win in today's Big Ten with that kind of a style?
It's going to be tough. Just like the NFL has become a passing league, college football is the same. And you're going to need that balance, and you're going to have that ability to throw that ball downfield. Barry Odom knows that. You got to stretch defenses. You got to take your shots downfield. The receiving core last year really underperformed. Not enough speed, and I think Barry thinks they've added enough speed to really make defenses respect the receivers and have to maybe not sit on routes as much and play as much zone coverage. So we'll see if Odom can make that passing game come to life, because like you said, Jake, it's awfully hard to win the ball playing 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Barry wants to punch in. He knows he wants to be physical, wants to be tough, but he knows he's going to have to throw the ball over the top and have those big chunk plays and those big plays that get you touchdowns as well.
Odom is a guy, I really like what he did at UNLV. I've got a cousin, Tom, and, you can write this article, right? Jake Query said that his cousin says, but I've got a cousin that lives out in Vegas and is actually a huge supporter of UNLV football and is, season ticket holder. And he loves him. I mean, he said, look, they are going to be a better football team. It might not be right away, but he liked just the overall, aside from scheme, Tom, I think Kurt Cignetti was able to do this with Indiana. I thought what Indiana did last year, not to turn a Purdue talk into Indiana, I get the danger there, but to make the parallel of first-year coach. Indiana a year ago started winning games because the plays that they used to air, they then were forcing other teams to make errors, and Indiana was taking advantage of it, and they were out disciplining people. And I think that if you look at UNLV, that's what his teams, when he turned them around, I think that's what, like my cousin was saying that he really liked about them, is they were a disciplined football team. Now, with that said, what things or personalities or characteristics about Barry Odom have you noticed that might give some glimpse as to what will carry over to his football team?
I think hard, smart, and tough, right? That's his mantra. And you talked about those things, but the discipline, I think that discipline was lacking a lot last year. A lot of penalties, a lot of sloppy play, inattention to detail. And what your cousin saw at UNLV last year was a team that was buttoned up, right? The big key, not just in football, but in any sport is, just don't beat yourself. Limit your mistakes and force other mistakes and hope that other team makes some errors that are costly. So I think just the way Barry Odom carries himself and the little bits we've seen in practice, it's sort of hard for us to tell, but, again, a team that's going to have that attention to detail. And that's going to be key, I think. It's going to be a tough year. I think Vegas out here has Purdue at 3.5 as far as over-under win total. So maybe 3-9, maybe 4-8 if you really want to be generous. So, but more than anything, just be competitive. Don't get embarrassed, right, Jake? 66-0, 66-7, 52-6. It often became an abomination on Saturdays, and it became very hard to watch for Purdue fans.
Tom, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, and I know that for all of us, it's uncharted territory. But when I look at, if you look at a weather map when there is a hurricane forming out in the Gulf, and you can see these little storms that are kind of spiraling off of it, right, and it's creating havoc in a number of different islands. It feels a little bit like still that's the era that we're in with NIL. And I understand that the NCAA is trying to corral it, and they're trying to create sandbags, and everybody is trying to figure out just exactly what to do there. And I don't know that we're there yet. And it feels to me like you have all of these little storms that are spiraling off of these decisions now, of the initial decision of NIL and what it was supposed to be, and then the reality of what it really is, and the transparency of, okay, fine, let's just take all the rules off of it. Where do you think, Tom, we are headed with all of this, and when will we begin to know that those little storms have now calmed down and we have one big one to deal with?
Well, I think, right now we have that with the CSC that's using Deloitte to sort of vet all the NIL deals. Anything over $600 has to be vetted and approved, and that process has begun. I guess a lot of deals have been rejected. I guess for me, it's going to be when people start to challenge some of those rejections and the lawyers start getting involved and the courts start getting involved. I guess I still find it hard to believe that anybody can tell anybody else how they want to spend their money. Who's to tell me how much I want to pay somebody to cut my grass? If I want to pay Jake Query $1,000 to cut my grass every time, I can pay him $1,000, right? Who's to say what's the going rate for anything? So those types of things, I think, and I guess I'll believe it when I see it. I think at some point lawyers are going to get involved, courts are going to get involved, and you're not going to be able to tell anybody how they can spend their money. So we've just started with this clearinghouse. We'll see how we go, and maybe another year before we get a real clear picture on how effective it is, and how the NIL picture looks moving forward.
Tom, you ain't sniffing my Toro for at least $1,500 till we at least get into $1,500. Just so you know, you know what I mean.
I know it's a nice mower. That's why I said grand. So.
That's right. I got to pay it off, right? You know, the other thing too that, and I like this aspect of what I'm about to say, but it is unusual. Can you imagine going back 15 years ago or so and predicting to yourself that you would be at Big Ten Media Day in Las Vegas, Nevada, so that you can get there in time to talk to the head coach for UCLA, right?
I know it's out of the bizarro world. I mentioned that to somebody the other day. I went back to 1985 to see where the Big Ten, what has become the last 40 years, right? 10 teams to 18 teams now. It's coast to coast. Media Day in Las Vegas. It's just insane. And where are we going? You know, that's the fascinating thing. Where's college football going? You know, that's a debate for another day. But you're right. Embrace the change and a bold new world. And for new fans, it certainly opens a bold new world again after that 1-11 abomination.
Well, I think about last year. For example, I went to Tom Dienhart as our guest, Gold and Black. We're talking about Purdue football, just the Big Ten in general. A year ago, I went to the game where Purdue hosted Oregon. I love Ross 8 at night, Tom. I just do. I think it's a great atmosphere. I love the fans up there. It was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun by going up and going to that game. But it was shortly after that game where I read an article somewhere where Oregon had made comment about the amount of travel they have to do. We think that like it's just you load 60 guys onto a plane and you fly out and play a football game. But when you consider the support staff, the equipment, all of the things that go into it, you start chartering more than just one plane. It's 2, 3, whatever it may be, right? And that all of those expenses, I then started reading articles that some of the schools were like, wait a minute, this might have been a bigger financial endeavor than we had anticipated. And that is going to impact some of the certainly less funded sports. Do you think we are still there in the terms of, I'm not going to say buyer remorse of Big Ten expansion, but is there still a financial aspect of this that is being second-guessed?
It probably still has to be evaluated, I think. I guess that 1 year, in the books, so to speak. I'm not sure what the books look like for those West Coast schools in particular, but I think maybe we do see some alteration when it comes to those non-revenue sports, right, as far as the travel goes. And these travels are just limited to men's basketball and women's basketball and maybe obviously football. So I don't know. We'll see where it goes. If belts have to be tightened, I'm sure that they'll be looked at. Yeah, I can imagine the expenses have been huge for these schools to fly all of these teams crisscrossing the country multiple times. It's not cheap to stay places, fly places, and you got to feed them too.
Ryan Brown is a fascinating story, right? Because if I'm not mistaken in this, correct me if I'm wrong, Boilermaker wanted to be a Tar Heel, back to being a Boilermaker. Is that right? Am I understanding this correct?
You got it correct. That is correct.
Okay. And then with that, I guess because you do have a new coach, you get kind of a fresh start there. And I'm talking about the quarterback position, by the way, is it his job to lose?
I think it is, without a doubt. I think he's brought in for a reason, right, Jake? I mean, the quarterbacks that were here in the spring did not impress. It's pretty obvious to anybody who watched. E.J. Colson's already left. Malachi Singleton's still here as well. And that quarterback from Washington State, whose name escapes me, Evans Chuba, is still here too. None of them really impressed at all. And that's why they went out and got, Ryan Brown. They brought him back, so to speak. He left shortly after Oregon got here, went to spring football with Bill Belichick out there in Chapel Hill. He came back because, again, I think Purdue realized they needed help at quarterback. I think Ryan Brown's a fit for what Barry Odom wants to do. He can throw it, and he can run it. He wants a dual-threat quarterback, a guy who can pull the ball down and run it if need be, a guy who can extend the plays with his feet, And you know what? Ryan Brown's a charismatic guy. He's a leader. He's a guy his teammates like a lot. So I do think it's his job to lose. Will we see a little bit of Malachi Singleton? I guess we'll see how things go with Ryan Brown. But I think for now, he's the guy that's going to be under center, the QB1, if you will. And if they can get Malachi some time, they will, just to get him some seasoning. But again, I think it's going to be, do or die with Ryan Brown come start of the 2025 season.
Lastly, Tom, before we let you go, since you're out there and you were watching, just Big Ten Media Day in general with everybody in Las Vegas, not talking about Purdue, what were the storylines that jumped out at you? Whether there was, a year ago, I guess you would say it was Cignetti coming out, and that's where he made some of his proclamations that caught everybody on their ear. Did we have any of that this year, or what seemed to be, even amongst the media contingency, the overwhelming storylines or themes that you'll take away of 2025 Big Ten Media Day?
Well, I think it was Curt Cignetti, right, with the comment about how they're trying to schedule like an SEC school.
Yep.
I think a lot of people applauded that. I think he's accurate. And I think he went up there with that agenda, and he delivered and did a great job delivering it. So that's probably been the thing I believe that has really created the most buzz thus far through these 3 days is that rant and, they dropped Virginia to really, like you said, go to SEC schedule. And you can't look in the mirror.
Tom, by SEC schedule, we talked about it yesterday, but basically what he means is, listen, if I've got to load up on what people are going to call cupcakes in the pre-conference, I'm not worried about it because I get enough meat of the sandwich in the conference itself. So I might as well get myself to a point where I'm getting wins, and then I get my quality wins within the conference. Why in the world do I need to go out of conference to collect quality wins when I've got, if you're the case of Purdue, USC and Notre Dame and Illinois and Indiana and Ohio State and Michigan on the schedule, right? I mean, and Washington. That basically paraphrases what he said, right?
Exactly right. Well said. That's exactly what Curt said. And they don't remember who you beat. They remember how many wins you had, right? And you look back at all you talk about great teams. You always talk about they went 12-0, they went 11-1. You don't go back and dissect who they beat. So you're right. You have plenty of opportunity for impressive wins within conference play. Why bang your head against the wall and play a rigorous non-conference schedule too?
And you think that was a sentiment that the reason I find that, and I'm glad I asked, Tom, because I would have been under the assumption that other Big Ten coaches would have looked at Cignetti and saying that and been like, here goes Curt Cignetti again. Like, come on, man. But you believe that actually what he was saying this time was kind of saying out loud what everybody's thinking. Is that a fair way of saying it?
Oh, yeah. The Big Ten circles, without a doubt. I think they want the SEC to have that extra conference game just so there's more similarities between these two conferences and how their seasons are constructed. So, yeah, I think if you got these coaches in a room privately, they all would say, yeah, we love what Curt Cignetti said.
Tom, I appreciate the time. We look forward to talking to you. Everything getting underway for Purdue. I'm looking at the schedule right here. August 30th with Ball State. Then a week after that it's Southern Illinois. And then it gets real because you got USC followed up by Notre Dame. So there is absolutely no rest for the Boilers once they're going. Tom Dienhart, Golden Black, joining us here on the program. Tom, appreciate it. Safe travels back, all right?
Thank you, Jake. Be good, buddy.
And you might actually find, Tom, that it's going to be a quick flight if you're going with the tailwind that has come across Westfield here, because it is a little bit windy here, which is quite the reprieve because it is very, very warm. And one of the things that is, in fact, wisping across Westfield here in terms of Colts camp and day and practice number 2 is that of which what was said earlier today at the start of this program. For a glimpse behind the curtain, if you will, for those of you who listen to the show, which I appreciate, or listen to the morning show with Kevin Bowen and James Boyd, who've been out here, or listen to JMV later. This is the time of year where the Colts and their staff, and we are appreciative of it, make available to us players for sit-down interviews to do for our show. And obviously that comes within the window of time that the players are done with practice or getting ready for something else that they may have to do here, film sessions, etc. So you kind of work on the Colts schedule, understandably. For today, that schedule meant just before we went on the air. So I conducted an interview with Bernard Ryman, who is in his 4th year. He is entering year number 4 as a left tackle for the Colts. And his story is a fascinating one. He grew up in Vienna, Austria. He began playing football as a young teen when he did basically like an American football introduction type camp, fell in love with the game, started playing it, went to Central Michigan because he is, 6'7" and 305, got an opportunity to play football at Central Michigan at the tight end position. After his second year of college football at Central Michigan in the MAC, he switched to offensive lineman, and the Colts drafted him kind of on a bit of blind faith on the fact that he could develop into their left tackle to replace Anthony Costanzo, who had retired. And in fact, Raimann has done that. His first outing was not a good one. He struggled early, but he has turned into and developed into a very good player and a solid left tackle, and you would say probably in the upper third of left tackles in the National Football League. Now, with that, he is in a contract year. So at the end of the year, he becomes, if he so chooses, a guy that can talk to other teams. He becomes a free agent, can go out there and see what is out there. There are a number of ways the Colts can avoid that, franchise tag being one, etc. But a year ago, we learned this from Chris Ballard. Chris Ballard had a year ago Ryan Kelly that was in a contract situation. And Chris Ballard made it very clear at the start of camp. I remember Ryan Kelly showing up for camp and saying when he showed up, yeah, the Colts made it clear to me that they are not interested in re-signing me right now, and they want to have that conversation at the end of the year. And that became, obviously a talking point, and then we became aware of the fact that the Colts decided to go in another direction. And Tanner Bortolini is the guy that it looks like is going to be the starting center should he stay healthy. That's who has taken the reps in practices so far for the Colts. So with all of that said, Bernard Ryman enters into a year where most projections say that he is going to or has earned the right to ask for some $20 to $21 million a year as a left tackle. Left tackles do not grow on trees. Sure, everybody has one. Doesn't mean everybody has a good one. And the Colts, it looks like, have a good one, and one that is going to be here for quite some time to protect whatever quarterback they may go with, whether it's Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones, whether they completely start anew. In that contract situation earlier today, just before we went on the air, I was interviewing Bernard Ryman for this show. I asked him specifically about his contract status, totally expecting and preparing for the status quo answer. The status quo answer, of course, would be, well, those things will play out when they do. And what he said, I thought to myself, I think that's newsworthy. I think, and I've done this for a while, so I can tell sometimes when a guy says something and I think to myself, I need to earmark that. I need to benchmark that. I think that is something that is going to create and generate conversation, and I was surprised with his answer. And I think others were surprised by his answer. And we will play for you his answer when we come back. To Grand Park in Westfield, Colts Camp day number 2 here on The Fan. it is hard to think of somebody from a sports standpoint. I mean, obviously Michael Jordan, there are a number, but if you look at people who were able to come seemingly almost out of nowhere, and we're going to get to the Bernard Ryman stuff here in just a second, but at the time that I was interviewing Bernard Ryman, it was very shortly after that where I learned of the passing of Hulk Hogan. And admittedly, I was not a huge fan of professional wrestling when I was a kid. Now that, it's interesting. When pro wrestling first kind of hit the scene, at least in the world that I lived in, meaning the era that I lived in, I think for a lot of people, their introduction to professional wrestling was strictly Georgia Championship Wrestling, which aired on Superstation TBS. And back before you had all kinds of cable options, you had Superstation TBS, which would air Georgia Championship Wrestling and the Atlanta Braves, and then Starrcade and a couple of other bad game shows. Starrcade was pretty awesome. It was so bad. It was based on people that would come and play video games against one another. I'll never forget the time I was watching it. There was like a 9-year-old kid. They were playing Cubert, I think, and the guy that the 9-year-old was going up against was like 42 years old. I'm like, what are we watching here? But Superstation TBS with Kids Beat, with Audra Lee and all that, you would see Georgia Championship Wrestling. And then around that time, Rocky III came out. And in Rocky III, Rocky Balboa fictionally goes up for a fundraising match against Thunderlips, as he was known. And I just remember being like, who is this guy? He had obviously the 24-inch python arms and ripped the shirt and the whole deal. And that was the introduction to many of us in the world of the character that would become known as Hulk Hogan. And then, of course, in World Championship Wrestling, I believe, then it was known, and obviously, WWF and then WWE and everything that you know it today. But when he won the belt against the Iron Sheik, I don't remember that as well. I just know that Hulk Hogan himself became a pop cultural icon and somebody that you did not have to, like myself, be a fan of wrestling to know exactly who and what he was. Then you went into the reality show about his daughter and his son, and you got a look at him, not unlike Ozzy Osbourne. Very similar to Ozzy Osbourne in the fact that the reality show gave you more a glimpse of the person versus the character that they were portraying. Obviously, Hulk Hogan then lately, in his later years, became a very, central figure within politics and et cetera. But Hulk Hogan passing away of cardiac arrest, it was announced when I would say Pinellas County, but basically Tampa area police were brought to his home for an assistance call, and it was cardiac arrest that it was discovered for Hulk Hogan, the cause of death as it's being reported. Also, Chuck Mangione, we mentioned, passing away, his family announcing that today he passed away 2 days ago. But let's get back into the Colts conversation with Bernard Ryman. So Bernard Ryman, who has been a really good player, and again, I think it is just one of those positions, and I'm talking about the left tackle position, that is kind of a thankless position because oftentimes you don't notice the left tackle until you need to notice the left tackle. And you don't address left tackle until you need to address left tackle. And this franchise and this market and this media group, myself included, have probably been spoiled by the left tackle position because Tarek Glenn was really, really good. I mean, really good. At no point in Tarek Glenn's playing career for the Colts was he anything outside of, say, a top probably 5 to 10 left tackle. And I know that the running joke in Indianapolis became by a lot of people, another false start for Tarek Glenn. But do you realize the fleet of foot nature you need to have to get false starts when you are that size a man, which Tarek Glenn is and was? And when Tarek Glenn surprisingly retired with a year left on his deal, if I'm not mistaken, I remember the Colts drafting Anthony Costanzo, and Costanzo, when he first got here, was just kind of this big, goofy, he had his hair was shaved head, etc. And Anthony Costanzo worked tirelessly at perfecting being a left tackle, and he became obviously an elite level left tackle. And then you get Bernard Ryman, who, as I talked about, was somebody that had to learn the position in college, got drafted. There was a little bit of a wing and a prayer, I think, by the Colts, but they fell in love with his size. And credit to Chris Ballard. Credit Chris Ballard. Because when he took Bernard Ryman, there were a lot of people that wondered whether or not that was a reach pick. And he clearly saw something in him that now, whoever would have guessed here heading into year number 4, that Bernard Ryman and his contractual status would be a storyline at Colts camp. But I think it is a storyline, and it may be more a storyline. Because when I talked to him this morning and he sat down, I thought, okay, I'm going to ask him about his contract. And then I went back to what I was talking about yesterday, which is sometimes we just assume a player wants to be here. And it's like, well, obviously he's going to want to resign here. And you think, wait a minute, though. But, I mean, just because a guy's played here, if you look at Ryman, he's played for different head coaches. He's played with different quarterbacks. He's played with different centers. You know, he may say, you know what, I want stability somewhere. I want to go compete somewhere. So I did ask him the question of, is this where you want to be? And I think he misunderstood that. But then he said something later that there was no misunderstanding. Here's how the first part of it sounded with Bernard Ryman.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I mean, obviously, we love it here. Would love to get things done, but I'm not involved in this. Obviously, you have an agent that takes care of this. From my understanding, they aren't on the same page about things. So
you say they're not on the same page.
As of right now, they're not exactly on the same page right now. So, but I mean, as I said, for me as a football player, I'm preparing for the season because that's what matters.
Okay, now, so I began that by saying, is this where you want to be? And he said initially he said no, and that's where I asked for the clarification. I'm like, no, I don't mean. He said no because I want to be in the Super Bowl, and I said no, I don't mean like where you are as a team. Production-wise, I mean, is this the franchise you want to be with? And that was the answer you just heard. Then when he said we are not on the same page, I wanted him to clarify by that. Did he mean, for example, in the situation with Ryan Kelly where not on the same page like the Colts just didn't want to have that discussion yet? Or not on the same page in terms of the perceived value? Here's Bernard Ryman.
From my understanding is that the numbers don't always quite add up yet. You know, the way they might value the position differently than my team thinks it is. You know, we're working.
The value of my position from where the team thinks it is, from where and I'm paraphrasing, where he thinks it is. Now, this is to me, I noticed that he said the numbers are not there yet. Maybe that means that Bernard Ryman is just in the exploratory phase of this discussion. Maybe it means that Bernard Ryman's agent has said, it's fine. They've already assured me it'll be fine. And one would assume that it's going to be fine because there is no waiting in the wings replacement for Bernard Ryman. That's a position that theoretically the Colts know they've got taken care of for a while and they don't have to look elsewhere, but you've got to get them locked in. Then you consider the money they have already invested to Quentin Nelson. And you wonder if, in fact, there's a little bit of a Miles Turner factor there, right? Of some other team may come in and Bernard Ryman may say, okay, I'm good. You waited too long. From the Colts standpoint, so I think this is still something that they're going to work out. However, when he says yet, it's something where they're not on the same page yet. That's Bernard Ryman, I think, assuming that they are going to be on the same page. But it also is really good gamesmanship from Bernard Ryman there. Because right there, Bernard Ryman just planted the seed of they may not find me as valuable as what my position is. And if you start to plant that seed, then what you're doing is you are potentially sending out the test balloon. You're sending out the flare to the Atlanta Falcons, the Tampa Bay Bucks, the New Orleans Saints, the LA Chargers, the Denver Broncos, the Seattle Seahawks, the Minnesota Vikings, the New York Jets. One of those franchises. You're sending it out there to them where they're saying, get his agent on the phone because we know his value. And let's make him feel valued here. I think he feels valued here. I think he likes it here. I think he knows he's going to be long-term here. But it's in his best interest in making it known that he doesn't feel that way right now. Show me with the money how much you value me. And until then, I don't feel valued. I think it's smart. But I think it's something to keep an eye on because he is a very, very important piece. And in addition, I think personally, and it's not my job to sit here and tell Chris Ballard how to do his, but we do that from time to time. I think it's smart for them to lock him in now because the more Bernard Ryman plays, one of two things from here forward for this season in terms of the value of Bernard Ryman, it goes one of two ways. One is he plays, continues to play well, and increases his price tag. No win for the Colts there. Or the other is he plays, gets hurt. Sure, you don't have him locked in, but now you're right back to square one anyway. I think it's in their best interest to get it done as soon as they can. And I think it's in Bernard Ryman's best interest to do exactly what he did, and that is plant that little seed to up that price. We'll come back. We'll put a tie on all of it. We'll hand it off to John next. Colts camp day number 2 here, Aquarian Company on The Fan. Well, I guess that means I'm good until about mid-August. This will be stuck in the head. Mo from Northwest Ohio sent me a message yesterday, said he got until Tuesday before he started playing this song in his head, or finished playing this song in his head. So nice going, Eddie.
Sorry,
Walking
Mo.
500 miles. You know my winter-summer challenge. I say it every year in the wintertime.
Yeah, I'm well aware of it.
Okay, I said in the wintertime when it wasn't long ago during the polar vortex where it was freezing outside. And I said, okay, either the coldest day of the year or the hottest day of the year. You pick one of those two. You got to walk 5 miles, 2 laps around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, 5 miles. And you can either do it on the coldest day of the year or the hottest day of the year, but you have to dress in the exact outdoor clothing you would be wearing on the opposite day. And it's interesting because during the wintertime when I ask it, everybody says, oh, the summer for sure. I mean, I can handle the summer. The winter, though, it's freezing outside. There's no way I could do it. I think right now if you tried to do it, if you put on right now winter gear and tried to do it, it would be there. I don't think you'd make it because, and keep in mind, the track temperature is going to be double what the air temperature is. It would be, there's no way you'd make it. It's very warm outside. Please stay hydrated.
There's one thing I have to say to that, Jake.
What's that? Okay. okay. That's about what would be going through your head during the delirium when the heat exhaustion set in, right?
Yeah.
Just before you went down. Okay, Pacers news to report. Fever news to report. Colts news to report. We will begin with the Pacers. Enrique Freeman, the Pacers, opted out of his contract, his two-way contract. He is now an unrestricted free agent. And Talon Peter, their draft pick, has now gotten a two-way deal. And so as a result, Enrique Freeman has been replaced roster-wise, at least in terms of the number standpoint or the spot standpoint, by Talon Peter. So the roster, as it stands right now, is full for the Pacers. WNBA side of things for the Fever, Caitlin Clark. No new news on her injury. That from earlier today from Stephanie White on this program, and they sought second opinion on Caitlin Clark. There was no new information to come from that, so she continues to be out indefinitely while they await that soft tissue injury to see when she would be available to the Indiana Fever, who tonight take on the Las Vegas Aces. Eddie Garrison will be on the pre- and post-game broadcast of that particular matchup tonight. JMV is out at Taylor's Pub in Greenbrier. Plenty of time for you to get by, have a cold one with him, whether it be Diet Coke, perfectly sufficient, or a beverage of your choice, but to be able to listen to what JMV has to say coming up here in just a couple of minutes. Back to the Bernard Ryman situation, Eddie. You told me that you had a question regarding that situation of Bernard Ryman.
I do. Two things. Number one, do you think Bernard Ryman's camp is looking at the fact that Quentin Nelson is getting paid $20 million as a left guard, and they're saying, hey, you're paying him that. My client is worth more than this. And then number two, do the Carly Ursay and all the darters have a say in this? Like, are they telling Chris Ballard, like, hey, let's hold off on committing any big money right now. Let's kind of figure out where things are at. Let's see how the season plays out before we commit to anybody down the line.
Really good question, especially the second one there. My assumption would be, while you may be correct that the Ursay daughters may say, look, we'd rather not do signings right before camp or in camp or whatever it may be, I'm going to assume that what they have said is, look, and I don't know this, Eddie, it's a great question. My assumption would be that they say to Chris Ballard, you have been hired to run the football team, and that includes determining what players are and are not worth what salaries. So before you throw a number out, and sign somebody to an astronomical number, we'd like to know what the number is first, but we are going to trust and default to your judgment whether or not that. So in other words, I think they say, here's the amount from a salary cap standpoint we're willing to spend. You have been hired and entrusted to determine in your best interest where that is allocated. And so long as you are staying within that parameter, obviously by NFL rules, then we trust you on that. So I do think that they probably have gone with the same understanding that their father had, which is that is his decision to make, and we will trust you. But it's a very good question, and that's not to say that's, on my behalf, the definitive answer. All right, thanks to Bernard Ryman, Stephanie White as well, Tom Dienhart, Matt Taylor for today. Day number 2 of Colts camp in the books. Day number 3 tomorrow. We will resume at noon tomorrow. And J&B is up next, of course, from Taylor's Pub. I thank you for listening to Query & Company.